Namaste Narasringhaya Praladala Dadayane Hiranyakashipu Baka Silatam Kalnakanaye. Ito Nishinga Parato Nishingo Yato Yato Yamitato Nishingo Ahir Nishingo Ridaye Nishingo Nishinga Madim Saranam Papa. You know that song. I sang it. The prayer to Nishingadev. Jai Nishinga. Jai Nishinga Pali Ki Jai. Nishinga Pali Dham.
So now that we have everybody here, yeah, come closer. Yes. So today is our inauguration of this Sandipani Muni Sunday School, we're calling it. We actually started a few years back with a family who was coming to our center on Nassau Street, but they ended up moving to Chicago. So basically the purpose is to talk about Bhakti, right, in a very accessible way. So we're happy to be here with, this is Mira, Arjun, and Rihanna, right? Yeah. So we're going to be looking at the TV. So before we start with the presentation, can I just get a little feel for what is everyone's exposure to Bhakti or Krishna? What do you know about Krishna? Rihanna, can we start? I know we had this conversation a little bit before, but what's your familiarity with who Krishna is or what Bhakti is about?
I know a little bit about Krishna and prayers.
Okay. And I remember we talked about Gita a little bit, and you were telling me that it was about a fight. You remember it was about like a fight, and there was two sides, and I believe I was trying to explain that Arjun was trying to run away from his duty or his job because he was losing faith that Krishna was behind everything, right? So the idea about Bhakti is that we're having full faith that we're not independent. We're always, Krishna is always behind us. He's always our well-wisher, always wanting us to be the best that we can be, essentially. And that involves always remembering him. So this remembrance of Krishna is a big part of this presentation. Our presentation will talk about Prahlad Maharaj. Have you ever heard of Prahlad Maharaj? No. I'm going to ask Arjun. I know we just talked recently a lot. So do you know who Arjun is? I mean, do you know who Prahlad is? No? Prahlad is a pure devotee, talked about in the scripture called Bhagavata, one of the Puranas. Basically, Prahlad is a child, and he was born in a family of demons. Okay? And somehow he was a pure devotee. Basically, as we'll find out, his mother was receiving some guidance from Narada Muni. Do you know who Narada Muni is? No? Narada Muni is one of, basically one of the pure devotees. We'll just leave it at that. He's one of the pure devotees. He's always absorbed in remembering Krishna and going many places all over the world, all over the universe, trying to help people remember their connection with Krishna. So that's going to be like the main theme about this whole presentation, about this whole day. Is just trying to think about our connection with Krishna and how we can relate to that in like a simple way, in a real way, something that we can take with us when this is finished, you know? if at any time anything becomes too confusing or it's just like a lot of information, be like, hey, I don't know what's going on, because then we'll be able to make it more relatable. That's the whole idea. We really want to connect with Krishna today. That's our goal, in our heart and in our mind. So I'm going to start this. So before we start, I just want to offer a prayer to my gurus. So anything I'm saying is just what I've learned from them, especially Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, who's my Gurudev, and his gurus are Srila Sridhara Maharaja and Srila Prabhupada. So I offer a prayer. Om Aginat Mirinhasya Giranjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, as I said today, our discussion will be about Prahlad Maharaj. So there's one temple in West Bengal that has a very nice deity of Prahlad Maharaj on the left, and Bhagavan Nrsimhadev, the lion avatar of Vishnu. Does anyone here, have you ever seen Nrsimhadev, the lion avatar of Vishnu? No? So basically, God is infinite, okay? We're finite. If I wanted to be green with yellow polka dots, I could find someone to paint them on my body, but I couldn't just like be that way. I'm just, peach. I'm a peach. But Krishna, God is infinite, is not limited to just one form like we are. Has an infinite amount of forms. So one of those forms is in the scriptures. So we find out about what forms God has taken in the scriptures, which kind of serve as a record. So one of those forms is Narasimha, a half man, half lion. And the reason that he appeared that way is described, but we don't have to get into that. But Prahlad is a devotee of this form of the Lord, Nrsimhadev. So, as we continue, just chant the mantra of Nrsimhadev.
Namaste Nrsimhaya, Prahlad Hiranyakashipu Bhaka, Shilatam Kama. Nito Nishima Padato Nishima, Yato Yato Nishima, Here Nishima Vidaye Nishima, Nishima Madhim Saranam. That's all. I'm glad to say it. Prepare to distribute it. Try Nishima Pali.
So that deity that I just showed in the last slide is in a very special place, which is even named after Nrsimhadev. It's called Nrsimhapali. So there's a place that is even named after him in India. Many pilgrims go there to receive blessings. So we will learn a little bit more about Prahlad, but most people who have been exposed to Bhakti a little bit are familiar with Nrsimhadev and Hiranyakashipu. Maybe the parents are more familiar with Hiranyakashipu and Nrsimhadev, right? And what most people remember is just this kind of epic battle between the king of the demons and this form of the Lord who is very ferocious, right? But actually, the central lesson and meaning from that whole lila or pastime is the devotion that Prahlad has for the Lord, and how it was so powerful that it even caused an 8-foot half man, half lion to emerge from a pillar, because the king of the demons said, God, you're saying God is everywhere, is he in this pillar? And just to prove the faith of his devotee, the Lord appeared in this very ferocious form coming out of the pillar, just to prove the point. But so the main thing though is this devotion that Prahlad Maharaj had, and so we want to learn more about that. So during the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj, he was asked by his father. So this is before Nrsimhadev appeared. It was just an ordinary day in the kingdom of the demons, okay? And Hiranyakashipu, as a father, was just interested in the education that his son was receiving. So he picked up his son, put him on his lap, and asked him about the education he was receiving, expecting him to talk about things that were more oriented to self-centered interests. But instead, Prahlad Maharaj started talking about Bhakti, to the shock of Hiranyakashipu, his father. So the main practice of Bhakti that we're going to engage in today with the Kirtan and the hearing and the chanting and the remembering, this is the main lesson that Prahlad gave to us. It's called the 9 limbs of Bhakti. So this is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam where he actually describes that process, and it's basically the foundation for everything we're going to do today. So the verse says, Shri Prahlad Uvacha Shradhanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Parasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atma Nivedanam Iti Pumsar Pita Vishnu Bhatischenava Lakshana Kriyeta Bhagavat Yada Tanmanye Ditam Uttamam. Prahlad Maharaj said, hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto him, in other words, serving him with body, mind, and words. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. So I know that's a lot, and I just said, tell me when something is too much. We're just focusing on 3 parts of this today. Basically, Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam means Shravanam means listening, Kirtanam means repeating or chanting, and Smaranam means remembering. So these are the fundamental principles of Bhakti, and that's what we're focusing on today. So the next part of the presentation here is in reaction to hearing his son tell about this devotional education, Hiranyakashipu became very angry, and basically he had decided that his son needed to be severely punished because he was not giving the demoniac education, he was giving the devotee education. And we're going to now read about and see all the horrible things that Hiranyakashipu did to Prahlad. And the point of hearing about that is to see and to honor how Prahlad's devotion never wavered throughout all these circumstances. And if you're willing to help me, I need some help reading, because I just read that whole paragraph and I'm very tired, okay? So I need your help to read it. Brianna, is it okay if we start with you for the first paragraph? If you can read both of those, and then we'll go to the next one.
After Prahlada Maharaja had spoken in this way and become silent, Hiranyakasipu, blinded by anger, threw him off his lap and onto the ground. Indignant and angry, his reddish eyes like molten copper, Hiranyakasipu said to his servants, "O demons, take this boy away from me. He deserves to be killed. Kill him as soon as possible."
Yes, so very severe. His reaction is very strong. But don't worry, nothing bad actually happens to Prahlad. Yes. So this is the photo of this. You can see how angry Hiranyakashipu is on. And Prahlad is he's not worried. He has full confidence that he's being protected by the Lord, so he's not worried. Arjun?
The demons, Rakshasas, the servants of Hiranyakashipu, thus began striking the tender parts of Prahlad Maharaja's body with their tridents. The demons all had fearful faces, sharp teeth, and reddish coppery beards and hair, and they appeared extremely threatening. Making a tumultuous sound, shouting, "Chop him up, pierce him," they began striking Prahlad Maharaj, who sat silently, meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even though a person who has no assets in pious activities performs some good deed, it will have no result. Thus the weapons of the demons had no tangible effects upon Prahlad Maharaj, because he was a devotee undisturbed by material conditions and fully engaged in meditating upon and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the unchangeable, who cannot be realized by the material senses, and who is the soul of the entire universe.
Thank you. So we have another picture, huh? But Prahlad is not worried. Hiranyakashipu could not kill his son by throwing him beneath the feet of big elephants, throwing him among huge, fearful snakes, employing destructive spells, hurling him from the top of a hill, conjuring up illusory tricks, administering poison, starving him, exposing him to severe cold, winds, fire, and water, or throwing heavy stones to crush him. When Hiranyakashipu found that he could not in any way harm Prahlad, who was completely sinless, he was in great anxiety about what to do next. So, we saw in the first picture, this big elephant is coming to crush Prahlad, but it doesn't work. And all these snakes, he's thrown into a pit of snakes, but still he's not disturbed. He's looking at this big snake right in the eyes, and he's just remembering, he's not seeing a fearful snake. He's not seeing his death. All he's seeing is Krishna everywhere. And again, this fire, he was thrown into fire, but still no harm came to him, in a very miraculous way. And we don't, we're not advocating you try this at home, but we're giving honor to Prahlad, who experienced these things and came out unharmed because of his very strong faith. And we can see how these pastimes of Prahlad's faith were so inspiring to so many people in the world that this very famous magazine in India, right, Amar Chitrakatha, they even made a whole issue just about Prahlad, tale of devotion from the Bhagavat Purana. So this is something that is not very light, this is something that has inspired people all over the world since Krishna consciousness spread throughout the world, but has inspired many people in India for a very long time, So it's important to just, hear these things and try to remember them whenever we can. So this is the next section. Basically, the last part of that verse was, so these are all verses from Bhagavatam, by the way. That's what those numbers mean. These are the English translations that Srila Prabhupada gave, and this is what we're reading. So actually, your Arjun and Rihanna, you're reading Bhagavatam, you didn't even know it. This is very nice, actually. So Hiranyakashipu didn't know what to do next. He was in very much anxiety. And so at this part of Bhagavatam, Prahlad, so basically this part of the pastimes ends, and now Prahlad is with his schoolmates, and he starts telling them more about the lessons he learned about Bhakti, and he's trying to encourage them also to practice it. So Prahlad tells his classmates not to waste time, chant Hare Krishna, and be happy. Rihanna, can we go back to you?
Sridhara Maharaja continued, "My dear friends born of demoniac families, the happiness perceived with reference to the sense objects by contact with the body can be obtained in any form of life, according to one's past fruitive activities. Such happiness is automatically obtained without endeavor, just as we obtain distress. Endeavors merely for sense gratification or material happiness through economic development are not to be performed, for they result only in a loss of time and energy, with no actual profit. If one's endeavors are directed towards Krishna consciousnesses, one can surely attain the spiritual platform of self-realization. There is no such benefit from engaging oneself in economic development. Therefore, while in natural existence, Bhavam Ashrita, a person fully competent to distinguish wrong from right must endeavor to achieve the highest goal of life, as long as the body is stout and strong and is not embarrassed by dwindling."
So here, Prahlad is addressing what typical so-called religious life is focused on, called the Purusharthas. Have you ever heard of Purusharthas? Basically, it's economic development, sense gratification, which is artha, kama, and then dharma, duty, and then finally moksha, liberation. So these four principles are typically what religious persons are concerned with. But Prahlad is saying, don't worry about any of that. So it's like really revolutionary action. He's saying, as we'll find out, that bhakti is beyond these things. So the way to think about that is, so what do you mean? Money is unimportant, sense gratification is unimportant. How can we think about that in a way that's significant and still live in this world where we're surrounded by that? So the idea is that Krishna, God, as the infinite, is the whole, W-H-O-L-E, the whole. And everything else, ourselves included, and all the activities we're engaged in, are parts of that whole. So the whole, our energy needs to be directed towards the whole itself and not the parts of the whole. The devotees always give the example of a tree. You have to put your energy in a very specific part of the tree in order for the whole tree to be benefited. It's the roots, right? You have to water the roots. And then if you water the roots, then the whole tree will flourish. But if you try to put water on every single flower or every branch or every fruit or every leaf, that won't help the tree actually. The tree will die, right? You only put it in one place, in the roots. The water goes to the roots, and then every leaf, every flower, every fruit, every branch will be nourished and very healthy. In the same way, our stomachs, we have to put our energy, our food into the stomach, and then that energy gets put in every part of our body, our fingers, our ears, everything, right? But if you try to, in a silly way, try to put the food in your ears or up your nose, that doesn't help. Your body can't process that. You only can put it in one place, and then it will be distributed in a very nice way everywhere. So in the same way, by putting our attention and energy, our time and attention on God, on Krishna, through bhakti, then everything else is taken care of. That's the idea, including the Purusharthas. So Prahlad is saying, don't focus on these four things as independent endeavors. Focus on the source of them, and then everything else will be taken care of in a very nice way.
Every human being has a maximum duration of life of 100 years, but for one who cannot control his senses, half of those years are completely lost because at night he sleeps 12 hours being covered by ignorance. Therefore, such a person has a lifetime of only 50 years. In the tender age of childhood, when everyone is bewildered, one passes 10 years. Similarly, in boyhood, engaged in sporting and playing, one passes another 10 years. In this way, 20 years are wasted. Similarly, in old age, when one is an invalid, unable to perform even material activities, one passes another 20 years wastefully. One whose mind and senses are uncontrolled becomes increasingly attached to family life because of insatiable lusty desires and very strong illusion. In such a madman's life, the remaining years are also wasted because even during those years, he cannot engage himself in devotional service.
So now Prahlad is really laying it on heavy. He's telling his friends, even though you're children, my fellow children, because he's also a child, he's saying, don't think that, oh, what you're saying is very nice and maybe we'll do it, sometime down the road. He's saying, the time that you have is not what you think. You're thinking you have 100 years to live or 80 years to live. But then he starts explaining all these reasons why that isn't the case. He said, for half of that time, you're just going to be sleeping. So actually, your time to act is only 40 years total. But then, on top of that, you have this distraction and that distraction and this distraction. So when it comes down to it, you only have a very short amount of time to focus on these activities. So the more that you prioritize them now, the more sure the more sure you will get the result from the devotional activities. If it just stays something in your head and something that you tell yourself you'll do eventually, you'll never get that result. And he stresses that the result is very much desirable because it is essentially the only way to get the fulfillment that everyone is looking for from all the external activities. Like we try to, for instance, we try to play the guitar because we think that this will make us happy, but eventually we get bored with that. So we go to the next thing, and we pick soccer for a while, thinking soccer will make us happy. But then eventually we get bored of soccer, so we're never finding the lasting fulfillment. So Prahlad is trying to tell his friends, this is the way to get the lasting fulfillment, and it will make everything else you do, because you can avoid those other things, but they have to be understood in the right context, they have to be understood in the right view of reality, and you'll get that fulfillment if you always keep your eye on the higher principle of Bhakti. And then you engage in those activities, but your mind is always fixed on this higher principle, then you'll actually get that fulfillment. Because when you're playing soccer, you're not playing soccer just because the sport is fun for a little while. You're playing soccer because you want to please Krishna. So even when soccer becomes boring, still the focus is on pleasing Krishna. So whatever you do next, that same focus will still be there throughout any activity you perform. So he's really trying to emphasize that, my friends, please try to take this seriously now. Don't try to put it off. So this is one point that my Gurudev, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, really emphasized as being very, very important. So that's why we're spending a little time thinking about it. Okay. Therefore, my dear young friends, born of demons, please act in such a way that the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the conception of material knowledge, will be satisfied. Give up your demoniac nature and act without enmity or duality. Show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service, thus becoming their well-wishers. Nothing is obtainable for devotees nothing is unobtainable for devotees who have satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the cause of all causes, the original source of everything. The Lord is the reservoir of unlimited spiritual qualities. For devotees, therefore, who are transcendental to the modes of material nature, what is the use of following the principles of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, which are all automatically obtainable under the influence of the modes of nature? We devotees always glorify the lotus feet of the Lord, and therefore we need not ask for anything in terms of dharma, kama, artha, and moksha. So we already talked about that. So that was basically what Prahlad Maharaj told to his friends, and they couldn't understand how he found out about those principles, because they all went to the same school, they all learned the same curriculum, so they were asking Prahlad, how did you find out about this? So then he tells them, Rihanna, do you want to read?
Narayan, the supreme personality of Godhead, the well-wisher and friend of all living entities, formerly explained this transcendental knowledge to the great saint Narada. Such knowledge is extremely difficult to understand without the mercy of a saintly person like Narada, but everyone who has taken shelter of Narada's disciplic succession can understand this confidential knowledge. Sridhara Maharaja continued, I received this knowledge from the great saint Narada Muni, who is always engaged in devotional service. This knowledge, which is called Bhagavat Dharma, is fully scientific. It is based on logic and philosophy and is free from all material contamination.
Yes. So this is very important because Bhakti and our connection with Krishna is not something that we just practice on our own. It's always something that necessarily needs to be practiced in the association of devotees who have already practiced, are experienced in that way. And not only devotees in general, but the real practice of devotional life, of bhakti yoga, doesn't really start until we actually, by the Lord's grace, we find a bona fide guru, a spiritual master to help guide us, because sometimes our mind tries to interpret something in one way, but that interpretation from our mind is just a result of our conditioning, of our preferences. And sometimes those preferences can kind of mislead us a little bit. So the bona fide guru is there to give us a lot of affection. He very affectionately correct us when our mind is misleading us in the wrong direction. And so Prahlad is giving honor and recognition to his guru, who is Narada Muni. So among the devotees, Prahlad Maharaj is understood to be a pure devotee. His devotion is not mixed with any kind of material desires. He's having pure intentions of just serving the Lord in a very selfless way. So it's a very good example for us to talk about today, So this is getting to the end already. Basically, this is the last slide, I believe. So Arjun, do you want to read it for us?
Prahlad Maharaj continued, My dear friends, if you can place your faith in my words, simply by that faith you can also understand transcendental knowledge, just like me, although you are small children. Similarly, a woman can also understand transcendental knowledge and know what is spirit and what is matter.
So he's saying, this bhakti is the knowledge of devotion is something so natural to the soul in everybody, not just an adult. Even a child, even a small child can awaken that love for God in their heart and practice in a very enthusiastic way. And so he's telling them, please, take this seriously as you go throughout your life. So that's why it's a good place to end. Prahlad Maharaj himself is telling that this is for anybody. This is the designations of age or gender or anything. It doesn't disqualify anybody, because those are just material things. Ultimately, everyone, even different species of life, are all Atma. They're all the same soul. It's just the different forms of life, the different forms of bodies in a specific species, those are all just determined by materialistic natural laws of karma and guna. But ultimately, everyone is the same kind of entity, Atma, Jiva Atma. And the Jiva Atma has an eternal relationship with the Lord. And the idea is just to awaken that, because it's already there. So it's more of cleaning a mirror that has some fog on it. You're just clearing away whatever is the obstacle, and whatever is left, that the natural constitutional position of the soul, that is something which is very ecstatic and happy and blissful and eternal. It doesn't die, and it's in relationship to the Lord. And so our goal is to just wipe away the fog on the mirror and see that for ourselves in our own heart and our own experience. So that's really the goal of Bhakti. So it's something very concrete. And these lessons from the scriptures, like Bhagavatam and the pastimes of Prahlad, they are meant to help us wipe that fog off the mirror. That's their purpose. So if we can continue to associate with devotees and we can continue to think about these things throughout our life, then we're not on our own. The Lord's hand is always there guiding us, always in our heart, always in the environment. So just by doing these simple things, our life will develop in a very nice way, and we'll see things will become much clearer to us. We'll have our sense of purpose will become clear. We'll have clarity about what is going on in reality. We won't be so confused. And it's very nice. It's a very nice process to engage in. It's very happy process. So that's why we're here today. We're going to practice some Sankirtan together. And we just have a couple of slides at the end. Oh, yes. So before we end this part, this is the two summary points from our presentation today. The first is that Prahlad had unbreakable faith despite all difficult circumstances. And then the second is that Prahlad is telling his classmates not to waste time, that they can engage in chanting Hare Krishna and thinking about the Lord. What we said before, Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam, they can start right now. Great place to start. So, then we had some points for the parents we can talk about later, if there's any interest in continuing these kind of classes. So before we stop this part, if we can just talk about what you guys can remember a little bit. Brianna, you want to start?
So Prahlad Maharaja was like a devotee, and that helped him find enlightenment, and he shared that with others to be like truly happy with their soul through different ways like chanting and kirtan.
Nice. What do you remember?
I remember that since he was like, I don't know how to say this, but since he was a devotee of Krishna, no harm could come to him, and he was trying to tell others to do the same.
Nice.
So then they could find real happiness.
Yes. So if you can just try to think about whatever stuck with you from today, every once in a while you try to think about it, it'll be very nice. You might want to learn more, and it can be a very natural process, where no one is trying to force you to learn something you don't want to learn or anything like that. Not artificial, but just from whatever usefulness that you think, oh yes, if I remember Prahlad and I think about what he was doing and I apply that in my own life, and then you see the result, you see what happens. Do an experiment, try to act in the way Prahlad Maharaj was telling, and then see what happens. And then if something good happens, you can tell, oh, this is something I should try to do more. And then, it's just about paying attention to the environment and paying attention to our consciousness and praying to the Lord to help us remember the Lord and to engage in His service however He would like us to do that. And then we can, our life will be very nice. So that's basically it for the presentation, and then we're going to have some kirtan.
And fireworks.
So, does anyone want water or anything before we move on?
Anybody want water?
Oh, yes.
You want to keep those?
That's okay.
You don't.
That's okay.
That is the biggest.
So for kirtan is always a call and response. So we start with the top mantra here, the Panchatattva mantra. Can everyone see it? And so I'll chant the mantra, and then everyone can repeat, and we go back and forth for a while. And then I'll switch to the Maha mantra, and then we'll go for some time with the Maha mantra. Jai Sripad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Honorable Puri Maharaj ki jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhara Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila Bhakti Nirmal Acharya Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila Bhakti Niskam Shanta Maharaj ki jai. Jai Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhakti Veda Vrinda ki jai. Jai Navadvip Dham ki jai, Sringapali Dham ki jai, Mayapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju ki jai. Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham ki jai. Shyam Kund Radha Kund ki jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi ki jai. Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki jai. Scientific Sankirtan Yagya ki jai. Jai Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bol.
Krishna Kesava Das ki jai.
Jai. See, it was ecstatic, right? Prahlad was in line.
You get into a trance after some time.
Yes, this is Mahaprabhu, the avatar of Krishna that came during Kali Yuga, told that this kind of kirtan, Harinam Sankirtan, is the Yuga Dharma. Means it's the one activity that anybody, no matter how qualified or disqualified they are, no matter what kind of family background they have, all of that doesn't matter. They can practice this kirtan, Sankirtan, and they can still cultivate love of God. They can attain even a higher result than those yogis who were living in Satya Yuga, were trying to meditate for hundreds of thousands of years trying to attain. Someone who's very fallen soul and just practices this Sankirtan Yajna in the association of devotees can attain an even higher result. This is one of the teachings that Mahaprabhu told. So it's interesting, it's like a supply and demand kind of idea where, the four yugas are there. In the highest yuga, Satya Yuga, everyone lives for a very long time and they're all very high natured. Right? So the demand for love of God is very high because everyone is practicing now. But it's very hard to get. You have to practice hundreds of thousands of years of yoga to do that. And then as each yuga passes, then the humans live for slightly less duration of life, and a little less amount of people are interested in love of God. Finally, until we get to Kali Yuga, where almost nobody's interested in it. So the supply is the least. The demand is the least, but the supply, the ability to get the highest result is the most accessible. That's so it's very interesting that this is how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has told, and that's apparently how it works. And so, anyhow, we can tell just from our little kirtan here, it's a super ecstatic experience, So why not even try?
Okay.
Right. You have prasad now, I believe.
Yeah. Let's stay on now. Scoop.
Are you happy you came?
Did a great job reading. I love the matching.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. Everyone wearing red. Beautiful.
Within, how have you been doing?
Good. Looking forward to this one. So, great message for the kids. They should be,
life to try to do this kind of save that. So now it's just trying to find who wants to receive that. That's the difficult part, actually. Like you're saying, this is Kali Yuga. Many people are not so interested, unfortunately. But surprisingly, there are many people interested. This is the surprising thing, you know? People are interested, but we just have to find the sincere souls. Who wants the deep thing, the real thing. Sometimes people just want the appearance of the thing, but they don't want the actual thing because it takes a little more work, a little more dedication or something. So we're trying to look for those souls who at least have interest in the real thing, and then we're trying to help them make it easier for them. You know?
They might be out there, they just don't know where. You know?
So it's one thing, more mathematics.
So that's why doing this and going out to Princeton, trying to find people.
So that was, sorry, Gurudev Bhakti Maharaj is a smaller photo in the middle. He opened our center in Princeton in 2012. I'm not sure if I told you about him when he started out. But he has an interesting story. Basically, he was a scientist. He received a PhD in quantum chemistry from Georgetown University in 1970. And he was working in that field. And basically, he saw the problems with science. So in quantum chemistry, they have to, they're looking at quantum physics from a chemistry perspective. And there was an issue called the observer problem, where consciousness plays a role in how the experiment comes out. But science doesn't want to give any acknowledgement to the role of consciousness or the effect of consciousness on science. So there's this issue, a big gap between what was actually going on and what they were willing to concede to. So he said, I went through all this education, and I thought this was like the highest of education in Western civilization. There's clearly a big gap in what they're presenting. How can I overcome that gap? How can I get a better education? So he knew just from his background in society, yogis, they know something about consciousness, and we look for a yogi. And at that point in the 1970s, Prabhupada had already started moving, and there was a temple in Washington, D.C. where he was living. So he found him, and he started asking questions, and eventually he became very convinced that what he was saying, and he became initiated with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, don't leave your scientific background behind. He said, use that, like we were talking about. Use everything in the service of Krishna. So he said, Prabhupada said that this Vedic knowledge is not just a sentimental thing. Many people who come to it, they treat it like that, but actually there's a very firm scientific, rational basis for it. And since you have this kind of capacity to understand in that way, please learn it and then present it to the Western scientists and help them fill those gaps that you experience, basically. So that was the purpose of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which was formed under the instruction of Prabhupada. He's the one who called for the institute to be formed in 1976. My Gurudev was one of the 5 founding members, and then he opened our center in Princeton back in 2012. So that's how I found him there. So this is what we're trying to do.
And that's proof of somebody seeking this out and not knowing where to go. Because you struggled to try to find a place.
This is my mother, by the way.
So, and here he's now 6 years into it, studying under Maharaj and helping him. So, you're a perfect example of that.
So this, the more traditional aspect of doing the kirtans, is what this program at the YMCA is for. But because kirtan is really is glorification of the Lord, so not just chanting traditional bhajans, but Prabhupada gave a shloka from Bhagavatam to back up this fact that even scientific knowledge of reality, how reality works, that is unbiased, the real, using your empirical senses, studying nature, and then giving, okay, these are our conclusions. That also is glorification of reality, how reality is working. So he's basically saying science. Right? You can use science as kirtan. Engaging in this kind of practice is factually kirtan. So it's also practicing this Yuga Dharma. But you have to do it in the right way, because as my Gurudev found, many scientists have so many biases that they're not even willing to look at, and that affects the outcome of the knowledge that they produce. So it's not real science, actually. So it's definitely not kirtan. But the real science where we can, so if you have a bias, it means that the bias exists in consciousness. But if you're not willing to admit that consciousness is fundamental to reality, then you're definitely not willing to see how that bias affects your observation.
Interesting. So you're saying
consciousness has a impact on the outcome.
On the
of
outcome?
Scientific
That's
experiment.
a fact.
That's very interesting.
Like for one example, we're
Yeah.
making a small booklet trying to present this in a very introductory ways that we can distribute over programs in Princeton. And in the booklet we have this example. Right, in the Vedic civilization, cows are worshipped, right, protected, go Rakshak. In the West, people think they're dimmed, right? So just this little difference in consciousness, how does that affect the world that we live in? I just found this out from doing the booklet. 40% of the land use in the contiguous U.S., right? So it's not including Alaska and Hawaii. 40% of all land use is just to support cattle for leather and meat production. Because in our consciousness, we think we can exploit everything. Cows are our food, and that's it. So how does that affect the world we live in? Well, we have all these problems with poverty, not using our resources properly, and 40% of the land is being used so we can continue to eat the cows. That starts in consciousness, and then it affects our world in a very concrete way. So if we had that more Vedic idea that cows are to be protected, and the milk that they produce can, Prabhupada has written many places in his purports how a whole economy can be created around just proper treatment of cows and the byproducts that they produce. Because when cows are happy, it's not. Some people who are vegans say, well, you shouldn't take the milk because it's just for the calf. But the fact is, for anyone who has a goshala, when the cow is very, very happy, at night it will be leaking milk. It's producing excess. So it's clearly not just for, it's excess. So that is to be used, and the whole Vedic civilization is literally founded on this kind of principle,
Yeah.
So this is just one example of how the consciousness of this object, a cow, changes the entire world that you can live in a very small way,
Different.
but it's very exemplary.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about mind over matter,
Yeah.
right? That's a consciousness over your actual physical matter.
That's a big part. Same thing. How the mind, you don't know what limits are there in reality, based on what is immediate, what nature appears to be, but the consciousness has access to what is more fundamental. But then the idea is the development of that takes us away from just the material sphere towards the theistic sphere. That's the thing, because so even if we accept consciousness as fundamental, then you might get people saying, oh great, so I'm just going to imagine the best possible life for me where I'm happy every day, I get a massage at 8 a.m. every morning, all this kind of stuff. But so then that won't lead to the fulfillment that people would think it does, even if they're accepting consciousness as fundamental, because basically they're looking for permanent fulfillment from finite endeavors, even on the consciousness plane. Permanent fulfillment can only come from from that fulfillment being based upon something permanent itself. The only actual permanent thing is the infinite, is God. Everything else is transitory, is always changing, and it rests on that infinite foundation. So that's the whole premise of Bhakti, is developing that relationship with the infinite, and then although the satisfaction that comes from that isn't the goal, because then that starts to pervert our whole approach, it still comes, just as we gave the example with the roots and the trees or the stomach and the body, that the fulfillment comes as a byproduct, or the focus is on the service to the Lord in the ways that Prahlad Maharaj described, but then everything else comes, because that is the whole. Again, the whole is taking care of itself, actually, and we're just moments of that. And we can either choose to be conscious of that and actively participate in that, or be unconsciously being dragged to the gutters and pretending like everything is all right, but it's not really all right. So anyhow, but so the consciousness is very important. So we're trying to cultivate proper consciousness with these programs. That's I guess the message I was trying to get back to.
Food is ready.
Sit here.
The food is over there, but we can
Oh,
bring
yeah.
it over here.